controversial subjects with the facts can be tense, but we are A$AP Science here to make things make sense.
So, rejection.
Are you going to talk about your rejection?
I was recently rejected, and I'm going to speak about it in a coded way because I don't feel like I want to talk about exactly what it is right now. But what prompted this episode is there was something that I wanted really bad. I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I was rejected, and there's still part of my brain that's like, no, I wasn't. I'm still gonna fight for this, but I'm just coming to terms with like dealing with like what does it actually mean. Obviously it feels crazy. I had to it's not that I don't get rejected that often, but like at this age of my life, there's not that many things that I'm chasing after. Yeah. So it was a kind of rejection I haven't experienced in a while.
It was an opportunity you've been dreaming about and you got rejected.
Yeah.
So it's very specific because rejection that we talk about today and a lot of the research is about like rejection from a romantic, sexual, or like friend perspective.
Social, like being bullied when you're young. Like there's many different kinds.
But yours is like
it's opportunity-based rejection.
Yeah.
It'd be like wanting to get a job and then not getting it. That's the kind of rejection I feel I just faced.
So rejection evokes strong emotional reactions such as hurt feelings, jealousy, embarrassment, anger, and sadness. And the reason it evokes such strong emotional reactions, like the science of it, is that they think it's because it's an important adaptive implication through human history. Like you need to be accepted by other people in order to improve your evolutionary fitness and like survive better. So
what's that, Darwin? Evolution.
But we've developed biopsychological mechanisms to understand and experience the intensity of rejection to try and minimize it, because like truly, if you were like rejected as a human back when it really mattered, like hunter-gatherer vibes, like you would die.
Yes, like it's important for us to live in groups that get along, and rejection is a tool of a social group that helps define those lines of like you must work with this group, otherwise you risk your own safety.
Which is so nice to think about, because I think like rejection hurts and makes people go crazy. And isn't that just like that reminder of like, it's your brain, you're designed like this for a reason, can be helpful, because I do find it is like, and in these studies, the amount of intense feelings that come with rejection is like so scary.
Perhaps some of the most intense.
Yeah.
And I guess the thing that has become challenging is obviously getting rejected often isn't life or death. Like technically in today's world, and we're all like exposed to forms of rejection that can be micro, macro, digital, real life, and so there's so many ways to feel rejected that I think it's important for us to like talk about this to get a grasp on how to look at it a little more objectively. No, you cannot just like turn off your feelings and stop feeling rejected, but it's important to realize like we're putting ourselves in lots of these situations and it isn't life or death in most of them.
One study of 168 hurtful episodes, this is like a study of people like interviewing them, 166 of the 168 hurtful episodes that they were talking about were caused by rejection and feeling devalued. So it's like
most people's pain is coming
like
from
if they're
form.
they were just surveying people, being like, what's the last time you were hurt in the last like whatever amount of time? When they would tell the story, they'd be like, rejection on the clipboard, check. Like it's very common. It's probably outside of like grief and death of a loved one going to be the most pain in your life.
Yeah, and there's a level of not that you can just accept grief or death, but those are often things so outside of your control you don't feel like you can do much about them, whereas rejection often feels like you've made a social misstep and you could have done something different, you should do something different, and so you play these games inside your mind that can give you a lot of real anxiety.
So types of rejection: romantic rejection, which is like the classic getting dumped.
That's for real, especially when you're young. That's like what every song ever is about.
Yeah, but then it's like we've been together for so long that it's like, should we dump each other for the feeling and to write a song and then get that doesn't make sense.
You paint a painting, I'll write a song. No, we used to always joke like when Adele like released 21 and 25, we'd be like, if only we broke up so we could truly feel this album.
Yeah,
because I would like cry to that album and just imagine like breaking up with you, but we never really got to feel it as people who really had gone through that.
You stupid, I should write my new album.
But there's levels of rejection from like friend, like it doesn't have to be romantic.
Yeah, so sexual rejection, like I guess we deal with that because of like Grindr. Dissolution of a friendship. So like friendship rejection, like ostracism by a group. It is giving me like high school. Like I'm going cross-eyed and like being like, oh, like
that's why I say like being
vibes.
queer or just different in general. Like you probably have to deal with another level of rejection, and I think it can make you stronger in some ways, but it can also damage you permanently in others.
Yes, totally.
Like,
being gay,
gay,
pride.
and or you could just be like an oddball and
Yeah.
feel rejected and have a hard time fitting with society. And for some people, that gives them a sense of themselves, but it can also have lasting effects on how you interact.
Oh
with
yeah,
the
I
world.
think it can do both. Like give you a sense of yourself, aka you become really resilient and like me, like can't feel emotion, but then like that's bad. You can also just be like ignored in casual encounters, or like getting rejected from school programs or school. And then I wrote Grindr just because I was like, I keep going back to that because I find that is a really interesting, like dating apps is like a way that everyone's setting themselves up to be constantly like rejected or not.
Yeah, like
I bet it's like mass rejection, but also mass acceptance. Like it's just the nature of them.
But as we know, as internet creators, and as everyone knows, as posting stuff online, it just takes one negative comment to 100 positive
Yes.
ones. So if you think about like the rejection to acceptance rate, say you message 10 people on a dating app and 8 like show some level of interest and 2 don't, the 2 hurt way more.
Also, this science that we're going to get into talks about how intense rejection is on your brain, that it makes sense that if you're on a dating app, you're going to just remember the rejection and forget all the people that you rejected.
Right. For
And-
no reason like that you would want
just
them
like
to
a
feel bad
vibe.
about.
Like
yeah.
they were, like they said their favorite movie was Frozen or something, and you're just like done, or like they whatever, like, and then you reject, or that's gonna leave your mind, but then there's gonna be like one person who rejects you for a reason you don't even know, and it'll probably like haunt you.
Yeah.
Literally, physically, like it will haunt you.
Yeah, it's a really awful feeling. Studies have found
You like choke up.
it can increase anger, anxiety, depression, jealousy, sadness, and rejection reduces performance on difficult intellectual tasks and affects impulse control. So in studies they've found like not
like
only are
dummy a
you
bag of
feeling
chips.
or you're less likely to be able to control your emotions in
Oh my
certain
god!
situations.
Hashtag like sexist quintessential broken up with girl eating chocolates throwing it at the TV.
Oh yeah,
You know what I mean?
that's
Like
the,
Legally Blonde vibes. Like
stereotype
they
of, like,
studied
eating ice cream.
rejection. Yeah, just being like, oh, I lost my willpower, and then like the anger. But I also read that sadness comes when the rejection produces a sense of loss. So you're like maybe feeling like you were rejected from something that makes you feel
sad.
That-
Even though ultimately rejection
that's giving
is
like you
triggering.
love someone and they like fall in love with someone else, and they're not poly.
That's deep, actually. That kind of rejection is like intense.
Yeah, that leads to
Where they're like, it's
sadness.
not about, I just like am more in love with someone. Like that's, you're never allowed to do that to me. By the way.
Okay, whoa. Ultimatum. I guess I won't bring up the date I had last week. Kidding. Anxiety is produced when the rejections include a threat to well-being or uncertainty about the future. That one's yours.
Say it again. Say it again. Say it again.
So this is like sadness comes when there's a sense of loss. Anxiety comes when your rejection includes a threat to well-being and uncertainty about the future.
Okay, yeah, and that to remind me, I got to say something that I'm working on right now that I learned and watched a really cool video from like a psychotherapist. It was like a lot of the things in my life I think are anxiety may actually, and this may be for other people as well, be linked and more deeply rooted to shame. And that there's like shame underlying a lot of things. So rejection obviously can lead to a lot of shame, which can express as anxiety.
Okay, I need to know more about shame because I obviously am swimming in it. Gay guy, happy pride. But every time people talk about shame, I do go cross-eyed and I'm like, what exactly is that?
It's like if you did something bad.
Yeah.
So most people can recognize that they made a mistake. Whereas when you have shame, you are a mistake.
Yes, my therapist says this. It's like shame is you are bad. Something else is what you did was bad.
Yeah, which is a healthier attitude to be able to say like, I made a mistake. I can like work. I can deal with that, but I am not a mistake. So shame's like the core of you feeling.
So
like,
you think your anxiety is coming from shame?
Well, I'm just evaluating that more recently. Like I was watching a really interesting video about it. Shout out to TikTok that shouted out a YouTube video, and then I went to the YouTube video and it had 100,000 more views, and it had like comments that were like, thank God for TikTok sending me to this. It was like such an informative, great video. And And then I was like, okay, I just need to investigate that more. I can't say for sure.
You're so hard on yourself. That's true. Like I do have a bit of a resilience where I go like, that was a mistake. Whereas you do go intense and you go like,
yeah, it's like self-worth is what it becomes attached
but it
to.
is amazing to watch in this way. Like you don't do it that often, but when you do, I'm like, damn, he's like hurting.
Yeah, I hurt. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about later how rejection sensitivity is a thing, different people have different levels, and it's important to understand and know if you are somebody who has a high sensitivity to this kind of thing.
Okay, the last thing I was going to say, the third type of emotion rejection thing is that anger comes when rejections feel unjustified.
Anger when rejection is okay.
So there's sort of like you can get sadness, anxiety, and anger from being rejected, but like depending on the situation, it will create different things, which makes so much sense to me. Like if I've ever been rejected and feel like I was misunderstood and like it wasn't justified, that is when you get mean about the person,
you can turn like spicy.
Yeah, whereas when you get rejected and you're like, damn, it is real, like that's sadness, that's anxiety, like what am I doing in the future, like that's anxiety.
Yes.
I remember I tried to get into that art show and got rejected, and that led to sadness and anxiety because you
start to feel like, oh, I
wasn't angry, I wasn't like, oh, they made a mistake. I'm like, no,
right.
They clearly just. But I do remember like messaging like the saddest message, like, oh, like maybe I clicked the wrong. I was like, oh, maybe I signed up for the wrong way. Like I'm actually not a student. Like I'm a random guy, because there's like different tiers,
right.
And they were just like, no, yeah, we know exactly what you are. Like you're not accepted. It was just like, yeah, that was like sadness, I guess. I wasn't angry. I was like,
you self-reflected to think it was all your fault, kind of thing. Versus like they made a mistake.
Yeah, and it produced a sense of loss and then a bit of anxiety about the future. And then I applied for school.
I really think that rejection is, you hear a lot of stories about successful people being like, oh, but I was rejected so often along the way. And it's often people telling the story of like, you have to be resilient because like that's the skill. The skill is being comfortable and adjusting to rejection and knowing that even the Beatles were rejected from 14 labels or whatever and then became the most famous band ever. Like, that is a message I've heard through my life that I think can feel a little inspiring, especially when you're hurt and knowing like the only way to get the things you want or experience as much as you can from life is to put yourself out there. Yeah. And the risk is rejection or some form of, like feeling loss of control or feeling sadness or whatever. But that's the risk you take to get the payoff.
Oh, so there's no other. I was just gonna say like for every Beatles, there's like 1,000 other bands that are just like.
That's true. Who also were rejected from 14 labels and never made it. But maybe they learned from it and maybe they got something else from it. Like you're right. The Beatles are obviously a special example as there are in every field. And I think any celebrity or musician or whatever who thinks that they're just the best and didn't have a ton of luck and timing and all that are deluding themselves and also have a God complex. But
the Beatles are so lucky to be the like first band that we just always go to. Like their legacy is so strong. But it is like really funny. It's like I go to the Beatles. I don't even really care or know a song. Yeah. I mean, I obviously know a song.
But don't you think in like 100 years, actually, people won't say that anymore?
It'll be Taylor Swift.
Well,
or Beyonce.
100 years, I'm saying, is quite a long time.
Then it'll be like
people will
Billie
just be
Eilish.
like, what are we talking about? Or that's like people telling us about like people from the 1880s, and we're just like, shut up.
No, I think that is why people are obsessed with Taylor Swift, because like she is the Beatles.
For now.
That's what I mean. Like people are obsessed with that idea. Like there are a finite amount, and I think it should be Beyonce.
And the biggest Beatle of all time? Jesus Christ.
Oh, I was going to be like Bjork. Okay, so humans have this thing called a sociometer. That's like not technically real in a way, but it's like a lot of these studies use this word, which just means that you're constantly monitoring your social environment to understand your relational value, essentially the degree to which other people regard the relationship with you as valuable or important. Okay. So you might not be aware of it, but it's true. You're just constantly like, da-da-da-da-da, like my friends love me, slay, safe space. That person does not love me, stay away. The barista here is nice, I'll come back. The barista rejects me.
Barista has real strong impact on
because
me.
we don't have a life and we just work from home, and the only person we ever interact with is the barista.
No, it's just like,
oh, like the rejection you can feel.
Yes. Yeah. And the elation I can feel when a barista is nice to me, when I feel like I had a nice look. I know that's so annoying. If you're a barista, it's probably so annoying that I'm like putting that on you.
Also, if you're a barista, you need to know there's very lonely people right now that you are their only like interaction interaction. And it's like, you should be paid more, and like, you're a therapist. Okay, but indications of low relational value like could be explicit indications of rejection, such as like a breakup, expulsion from a group, or subtle ones such as disinterest, disapproval, or dislike, low responsiveness, distant body language, and avoidance. That's an interesting one, I think, for like prides coming up, like when you're at a party. Like, I like love talking to people and love partying, and like when someone is not giving me back like responsiveness or distant body language, it is like so painful.
Yeah,
it's
I hate that too.
It's like, and then that's when I know, and I guess you get anger.
Get spicy.
Yeah, because you're probably feeling. Yeah, but you're probably feeling scrolling up when the rejection feels unjustified. It's like, I'm fun. That is it, because gay guys are. Happy Pride. A diverse array of the rainbow. So you can meet gay guys who are like not getting your humor, and you're kind of like, I think you're dumb, and then you get mad because you're getting rejected. Like, that's happened to me before, like, where I'm like, I'm being funny, and they're like taking me seriously, and then all of a sudden they're like, that's not interesting. You're like, it was a joke, and then you're like panicking, and then you're like, well, now I'm angry.
I think it's like to take a step back, because I don't disagree. Like, I definitely I have a lot of anxiety going to like parties and stuff because of this high. So what do you call it? A sociometer? Like, mine's always dinging off. Like, that person hates me. They never like me. Whatever.
Yeah, you have a sociometer like on the subway.
Yeah.
Like, that person hates me. That person. And I'm just like, what?
Yeah. It's called having anxiety and shame and whatever. And where was I going with that?
Just like the anger coming from someone, maybe.
Or
not.
I guess it's like sometimes if you can step back, because I think in the moment I have a hard time and I place it all on myself and feel really insecure. But sometimes you have to stop and be like, maybe that person's insecure. Like, we're all in this kind of intense environment, and like, what bothers me, because I'm not a funny guy like you, but I'm just like, just be nice to people. Like, I love to chat to new people, but sometimes people give the vibe that you are not worth their time.
Wow. Actually, now I'm like, I'm a bully.
No, you're not.
No, well, I'm not a bully, but I'm like, I also am we're bringing up two different things. Mine is like humor and shooting the shit.
Yeah.
And when I can't like shoot the shit with a stranger, like in a gay setting, I think I might become
like
the mean
goodbye.
One. Like, you know, or like, I could imagine
it could be perceived that way.
They perceive it as me being what you're describing.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm perceiving it as a rejection from them not getting me. Like, I'm just like, it just makes me realize it's all so complicated, and it is all about rejection in different ways.
Yeah, everyone's like guarding themselves in some ways. But yeah, Greg, not everyone's so funny.
No, it's not even that funny. It's like, it is interesting. It's the guarding. It's like, I really just like love talking to people. When I sense that someone's guarded, it's hard for me. Yeah. You're really good at that. You're good at talking to people who are guarded.
That's
you're
like
so friendly. You're so like whatever. But like, I'm like immediately like, let's shoot the shit. Let's get into it. Let's talk about real things. And some people are just like, I just met you. I don't really want to talk about like actual
Maybe I'm definitely
things.
Not that good at this, but I just
No, you are. You're good at small talk.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are, Mr. Dog freaking
dog
like park
dog
ass.
park.
Like, hey, Susan. Like, you're so small talk.
Okay, but I mean like at parties and stuff. Like, for me, I'd much rather have a meaningful conversation. This is why I find parties difficult, because it's so loud. You can't have real conversations. It's all just like kind of yell talking.
Yeah.
And anyway.
Happy Pride. Okay, so rejection in the brain. They've studied like your sociometer, this sort of constant like where do I stand, like fear of rejection thing, is mediated by your dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and your anterior insula. And these are the neural regions of your brain that are associated with physical pain, which is why people report that when they're hurt from rejection, they have physical pain. Like, tons of studies on this, which is so
and why
interesting.
we say terms like heartbreak,
and
why like you feel literally in pain, like you suffer from rejection.
And it's like, that's
they
a nice
are like, your
feeling.
brain is actually experiencing pain in almost the same way as if you experience physical pain. Obviously, there are two different sensations, but when we look at the brain of someone like under an fMRI or brain scan and trigger emotional pain for them, it looks like physical pain in the brain.
And I do feel like
that's amazing.
Is a nice thing to know in a way, because it's like,
it hurts.
It's not.
It's real.
And it's not just like me being crazy. It's like everyone has this physiological feeling of hurt. Like it's in our brains. I see we have the same studies. We should talk about them. The Cybercatch and the Tylenol.
Okay, yeah. I was going to say, I found this so funny that one of the main ways that they study rejection is this, like, I actually think it's called cyberball. That's what, cyberball experiments.
They put an fMRI on you.
Yeah, so people have this fMRI like scanning their brain. They start to play like a digital game of catch with two strangers.
Yes.
You know, throwing the ball back and forth,
Fun.
and forth.
We have to do that more.
Yeah.
Like, what happened to catch? We're all just on our phones. Okay, continue.
Happy Pride. That's a straight person thing.
No, it's not.
I'm kidding, but
let the lesbians be. They're playing softball all day. Continue.
Then, all of a sudden, the two strangers start digitally not throwing the ball back.
You got rejected through fake ball play with an fMRI.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we're just going to keep throwing to each other. So in those moments is when they realize, okay, rejection's getting triggered, and the pain in the brain, we're seeing the brain scans light up.
Or there's more blood flowing through your dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and your anterior insula when you're getting rejected in cyberball in these studies. AKA two people stop throwing a ball to you.
Love that.
I love that.
I want to play cyberball.
Me too. I mean, I don't really that bad. I could play real ball, but
I'm curious how it actually works, but I could play real ball.
I kind of want to play catch with two people and slowly stop throwing to one and just be like, feel that?
That is actually sad, especially if you don't, like, when we were on a trip once, you were like playing Frisbee with two other people that you didn't know. I almost feel like that would hurt more than friends. Friends, you'd be like, oh, they're messing with me, or like they're being like dicks. But two strangers who kind of like slowly decide not to throw to you as much.
If they did that to me, I would, one was French. I would be like, well, I'm going to bomb France.
Don't say that. Right.
The other one I think was from the Netherlands. So I would bomb the Netherlands. It would make me hate. I would go so into being like everyone from that culture.
No one on this podcast is bombing anyone.
No, I know. I'm just saying that it would create anger because I'd be like, this is unjustified because I can throw a Frisbee.
Yeah, so you do get angry after all that throwing it on me.
Because it would be unjustified. But these gorgeous two men were very patient with me and threw me the Frisbee, and even though they were doing like backflips every time they caught it and I was simply catching and throwing, they made me feel very included. And it would hurt me so deep if they just stopped throwing me the Frisbee.
Yeah, or just less and less, and you start to pick up on
guys
cues.
Over here. Still here.
In these like fMRI studies, they also have done examples of emotional breakups and had people go into the scan and shown them pictures of their exes and seen these same regions of the brain fire.
Okay, now let's go into the Tylenol.
Yeah, sure.
I am like, should you just take Tylenol? Okay, so essentially the same people.
I literally have like in bold writing, be careful with this advice and study.
So they gave Tylenol or a placebo daily for 3 weeks and compared the placebo group with the volunteers who took Tylenol and found that people who took Tylenol recounted fewer episodes of hurt feelings and daily self-reporting. So it's just sort of going back to this idea that there is this physical pain aspect of hurt feelings and rejection, and that like Tylenol.
And that a medication that can impact or minimize pain sensation for physical pain had an actual effect.
Obviously, you shouldn't do that, but there's something about getting rejected and just popping Tylenol that I'm like, smart. But
I've been considering it.
Don't do that.
Definitely don't do it.
The science is there.
There's other like strategies that we'll talk about at the end here if you are trying to deal with rejection that are much healthier, much more recommended. Don't take drugs to feel better unless you need to or are directed by your medical professional.
Also, I read a study about how criticism is actually a form of rejection. And I was like,
criticism is a form of rejection.
Because criticism towards someone is conveying that like they think you have a negative attribute, and that people often refrain from strongly criticizing those they care about. So like if someone's criticizing you, they're making you feel like you aren't valued by them, which is the definition of rejection. And that like essentially being like, you might be like, oh, I don't really experience much rejection because I've been dumped. But it's like if someone's criticizing you and it's feeling, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I guess that is true. Like I would never criticize.
Or you'd at least find a way to say it that felt the least critical.
Well, maybe actually it's just a good way to think about how important it is to not be critical in some
I can't
ways.
remember if we talked about this or I just heard it on a podcast. I think it was on a podcast. It was like, we are often more critical to ourselves than others. I think it's like 68% of people say that they are harder and more critical of themselves than of other people. It's like 16% of people felt like even, and then or they're whatever. The 68% was the interesting one, and I thought like it's interesting to think about. Like, if you're critical to yourself, are you feeling like self-rejected? Maybe that's a form of, maybe that's shame or something. Ultimately, I'm just like talking out of my butt here.
You watched a shame video and now he's obsessed. Well, you're critical of yourself.
Yeah, that's why I'm bringing it up. And then I'm just like, yeah, how does that?
Because you're critical of me, and then your excuse is like, if you only knew how critical I was of myself. Like,
no.
like, I'll be like, okay, well, I don't really want you to be critical of me or yourself.
Okay, that's what I'm learning about Gregory. And I'm not saying if only you knew. When I'm saying that, I'm trying to let you know, like, I'm not just being critical of you. I would be critical of myself at that same thing. Like,
yeah.
I guess not that justifies it as I think about it, but if I'm like, oh, I'm not just like saying not to do that because I don't want you to do it. I don't want myself to do it either.
Yeah.
Like, if you leave the stovetop on, which I have done as well. It's like I've accidentally forgot. When I'm saying, Greg, oh my God, be careful, turn this off. Like, I'm trying to then say, I would say the same thing to myself in the exact same way, which doesn't necessarily make it right.
Whereas I think I need to be more critical because I'd be like, leave the stove on. Like, I am like dangerously like
lax.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I am like, be more critical of me. Help guide me.
Oh my God. The anger in your eyes. Are you kidding? If I'm critical to you and it's not the right day, I will actually be thrown
Well, you
out.
have to be ready to fight back.
Well, I can't. I'm not.
Because I'm
not
testing your
like
critique.
that.
I'm like, okay, well, if your critique is real, it has better stand up to scrutiny.
Yeah. Okay. I am not built like that. I will crumble. Okay. So now we're going to talk about jealousy and rejection.
Wait, I want to talk about one more thing. Because you talked about like acceptance as the other side of the coin almost.
Wait, what? No, I didn't.
Or you were talking about like
no, I didn't.
What it felt like to have those guys playing Frisbee accept you, like it was meaningful.
Oh.
There was just a quote that I found. You kind of already articulated this, but I thought it stuck with me. It says, we experience acceptance when we think our relational value to other people is sufficiently high, but we feel rejected when our relational value is not as high as we wish. You mentioned relational value. I'd never heard that term before, but obviously the people you feel most comfortable and accepted with is when you're like, they respect me. Mm-hmm. They value my presence. And often when you're rejected, you're feeling like, wow, they don't think I'm good enough, right? Like in my instance right now, my like job offer, I've been rejected. And so I'm like, dang, like they don't see the value in me.
Yeah,
our relational value is like, they don't see what I want them to see. And so I feel diminished by that.
That's the rejection.
But
the way that was described, it's almost like you could be accepted by someone, but not in the right way and still feel rejected, or no?
I'm not sure if that's what it's saying. I think it was just interesting to think about it as like you feel accepted when like the people you feel most accepted by are the ones who you know, like love you no matter what.
Yeah,
will always
and they
want
think
the best
that
for
you're
you.
like a good person.
Yeah, they're like you have value. Like not like they're trying to get something from you, but you bring enough to them that they want to be around you. And then there's nothing worse than that feeling of wanting to like, whether it be romantically be with someone, let's just use that as an example, when you're broken up with, or even if you're just not feeling that they're like into you as much
or
as
like
you're
a
into
crush that's not
it feels sucky when you're like, damn, like don't you see, like I'm good, like you don't see that hurts so much. Anyway,
oh my God, like a real crush too, like a school one where you see them every day. Because I feel like crushes now are like online or like not real.
Well, we don't know.
Or like you can't get rejected in the same way. You can get so rejected if you're like walking to school every day and have a crush on someone and they're just like actually like ignoring you.
I think having a crush when you're like a teen is actually probably one of the craziest experiences.
Yeah, hello, like an Olivia Rodrigo album. It's why every young person's album is amazing because it's like that does go away.
Yeah.
Well, because it's school. Imagine if we just had to get together with all the vicinity of our community right now every day. Like you'd have so many crushes.
Maybe, but as you age, I think it just like the intensity of those emotions are so much more tempered because you've had so many experiences to know and like it still hurts.
And in high school, you're all acting insane.
Yeah, I was like totally unhinged with like the boy I loved. I would come home on MSN and I'd be like crying my eyes out, messaging my friends, and I wasn't even out. So I had to just be like, he's not able to hang out tonight. They're like, why are you so sad about that? Like I don't know how they didn't know I was gay. I would literally be like, he's grounded for the summer. I'm not going to see him for months. He's my best friend. And like literally at my home, like bawling my eyes out.
So good. Your mom's like, okay, what's going on
he's
here?
Just
like
such a good friend. Literally in love. Okay, you were going to talk about something,
or just that jealousy can be like intertwined with rejection, and although you might think of jealousy in regards to like romance and sexual relationships, you can feel jealous whenever there's a third party has like caused you to have lower than desired relational value to another person. So it doesn't have to be sexual or romantic. It could be like, you know how people, like some people will be like, I remember once she was actually like a Mix 99 DJ host, I guess, like who lived on my street. I just remember because like her kids would always be like playing outside and they'd be like, Mom's asleep. She has to get up at 4 because she did like the morning show. And I was always like, weird. I was like, your mom's asleep? Like, wow. But anyways, once I was like hanging out with her and someone else, and I was like, gonna, I guess, go in for a snack, but obviously the mom was asleep, so like it was like nanny vibes. They had money, and then like as I was walking in, she like turned around, she's like, oh, actually, like you can't come, like my mom says 3's a crowd. And I was like, what?
So there was another friend
and then
in you.
That stuck out to me. It's the 3's a crowd, which is what I'm bringing up now, like with jealousy. Like when there's 3 people is like, when you can start being like not romantic, whatever, just like 3 friends. You might start being like, they're laughing a lot about that trip they took together, and now my relational value is lower. Anyways, they said that to increase your desirability, what can happen is like through that jealousy, you start to disparage the other person who the person's saying is like above you. Okay. So all of a sudden, like, one person leaves and you're like, I know you had fun on that trip, but haven't you ever thought that they're kind of like a bitch when they're hungry or whatever? And then the other thing is that what also can really happen with jealousy is that people will sometimes behave in like really intense outbursts towards the person who's making them jealous, with anger and threats and even sometimes physical abuse, which then makes you even more undesirable. Yeah. So they were just saying like the jealousy as a result of rejection will in negative ways manifest with like completely hindering because you're like actually like all of a sudden getting angry at the person who's making you feel jealous, or you start to disparage the person who the other person's saying is like quote unquote above you. Yeah.
Which is not actually a good quality. Like people don't want to be around someone who's like that.
Yeah. But it just like was like very relatable. Like I think jealousy is such an intense emotion, and it is a lot to do with rejection, and it's like a hilarious time where like humans do crazy shit.
I think we should talk a little bit about the ways in which you can deal with this.
True. I was literally just gonna like keep going on all the messed up shit, but you're right. We should get to the solutions.
Yeah, and I think I'm just gonna quickly pass over the rejection sensitivity, just to say the message. You, like me, I think I am, might be somebody who's like highly sensitive, not just to rejection, but
so you think that? I think you're so resilient.
Yeah,
and you like.
I actually don't think I am, but in some ways, like a lot of this had to do with over analyzing situations around you, right? Like, so I constantly overanalyze people's facial expressions. I like their body language or whatever.
I think you actually are. Now I'm like, you are.
I think it is all the fear of rejection, but it's weird because on the other hand, I put myself in lots of situations.
Yes, this is why you're so crazy.
I thought you were going to say interesting or amazing.
I literally was going to say interesting and amazing, but I was like, we're on a podcast. So I'm going to entertain the masses and say crazy. But I think you have a lot of rejection sensitivity while simultaneously putting yourself in the most intense opportunities to be rejected, of which you are not actually rejected that often.
Yes, I am.
Sorry, I think that like actually you don't care about rejection the way a lot of other people do, but you really care about like experiences and success, or have in the past, to put yourself in really intense situations. But you're not someone who's like that afraid of like a friend like rejecting you or something like that.
No, I don't know. Yeah,
like it's just like
but
there's something going on there with
because
you.
in some ways I find myself to be like, extremely rejection averse, but I do put myself out there a lot.
Whereas I think I'm obviously afraid of rejection, so I'm like, I'm not gonna like audition for a part or do something that's like so rejection heavy.
Yeah, that's why I've always thought I just like have anxiety or fear of death or like fear of pain, and so I have like a lot of these signals I get and pick up on are related to that, but maybe they were related to rejection. It's like high social awareness, like not, which may not be real. Like a lot of those things in terms of like dealing with this, obviously work with a therapist, but it's like you have to reset. Like I like to think I can read not people's minds, but because I've had a lot of like that confirmation bias where I'm like, I saw some, like even with our work sometimes I'm like, I saw something in their eye. I know they're going to come back and say this. And you're like, you're crazy. And then they come back and say this, you know?
And sometimes they don't.
I know. I'm saying confirmation bias.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Gotcha.
But I've had enough of those experiences where I'm like, I did read that subtle motion in their eyes and I was kind of right. So that's why I think am good at like strategy and stuff and those kind of games, because I feel like I can pick up on people's cues.
And when we do get rejected for things through work, like, you do spiral for like a week of sadness where I'm like, I actually am like, well, good. I didn't want that. Like especially with work, because I don't care really about work.
Yeah.
Like I no, like I don't like, but I care about friend. Like if some friend rejects me, like I'm a people pleaser. Like I will grovel at their front door. I'll like bake them cookies and then be like, I'll do anything for you. Like I would become a psychopath around that, like relationship rejection, but work rejection, because I honestly am like, it doesn't devalue me because it's like,
it's not how you value yourself.
Yeah. Whereas you do. Well, and then it's sad because I just sit there, I'm like rubbing your back, like, okay, I'm going to go for a walk, enjoy the rejection from this thing that like doesn't matter work wise. Okay. Solutions.
Let's
You've been
talk about
rejected.
solutions.
I've been rejected. What do we do?
I have a couple things. I'll go through a little list, but feel free to chime in. Number one, I think before you're even rejected, it's like just accepting that rejection does and will hurt. Having a context of like, you are going to put yourself out there in life. You are going to be rejected at times, and knowing that you just can't escape this feeling, right? Like all humans experience this. It's normal. That it will eventually go away. Is like not necessarily helpful in the moment, like even when you're feeling like depressed or if you're sad or anxious, and people are like, it will go away eventually. But sometimes that gives you context of like, you just got to grind through it.
Yeah. Also, like, I don't like the way this is written, but like make sure that it's real, but like there can be ambiguous social cues and you can misinterpret neutral things as rejection and negative feedback. And so there's something there. It's like,
I have probably,
other than being like absolutely dumped by your loved one, like there's a lot of other forms of rejection we feel all the time that is a bit more like that person's just doing their job or is neutral, or
like you said with the Tinder, it's like they may not have even thought more than a second about it. Like they may not have thought much about rejecting you, but you're taking on all these ideas of like, I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. They didn't think I was tall enough. They didn't like, you can build this narrative in your mind that may actually not have any evidence to it.
So hashtag pride, hashtag Grindr, hashtag sexual hookup apps. I was reading one article about Grindr and how it so negatively affects gay men's like internalized view of their like bodies and self-worth, and they talked about how when you're on an app like that where so much of it is like visual and you get rejected all the time and are also doing the rejecting, like some people will take that rejection like so seriously, and then a lot of like the solutions in this article was like having to be like cup of tea was like what they kept saying, like you're not someone's cup of tea in the same way that other people aren't your cup of tea, and it's not finite. Like I think sometimes gay men are like, there is a sexual like hierarchy based on how masked and muscly someone is, and they were just like, that's just not the way the world is, but Grindr makes you think it is. And that like there could be someone you really had a crush on who's like truly like has some arbitrary reason why they're maybe not physically attracted to you, but like that doesn't mean there aren't a million other people who you find attractive who are attracted to you.
Yeah.
But it's like, it is weird how these apps design you to not think about nuance in any way. It's like,
yeah, not realize that sometimes even someone who's not attractive to you in the right context becomes attractive.
Yeah.
Because of their personality, because of like what they're like. And you can be that for other people as well. And unfortunately, when you're on most dating apps, it's a visual first medium.
Yeah.
And so I think it's hard not to feel offended when you're like, well, even that hurts, someone not being interested in how I look visually.
But there's something like so confident about someone being like, oh, I wasn't their cup of tea. Like,
yeah,
like they use that term, and I don't know why the whole study stuck with me, because it's like, oh, that is a really confident,
it's a self-confident
like if
thing
someone
to say.
says that, I'm like, damn, that's so true and so smart. There's not a finite reason why someone would find you attractive, and there's not a real hierarchy, and everyone has their own like whatever's.
I think the other thing is like increasing exposure over time, not to just like go throwing yourself out there, but like anything, you can build a higher tolerance. And people, obviously, as you said, like some people have a different frame and reference point of how sensitive they are.
Yeah.
But I do think like the more rejection you experience, the more you will can contextualize.
Yeah.
Of course, if you're only getting rejected and that's your context, that's not going to feel good. But like people who have had to apply for lots of jobs and get the job eventually, or get a job they like they understand the process. If you people who are performers, like you have to be okay with rejection, because you even hear like famous celebrities talk about how much they were rejected or how sad they were they lost out on X role or Y role. And so if you can at least build that tolerance to just feel like, okay, I can get through it. I've got rejected from this audition. Maybe it's a matter of like knowing when to put and how not to put all your eggs in like mental eggs in one basket. But I think it's hard.
There's also natural responses to rejection. Like one is that excluded people will actually become more sensitive to potential signs of connection, and then they start to tailor their behavior accordingly. So some people might actually, through rejection, learn how to pay more attention to social cues, be more likable, and conform to other people more. Like this is not saying what you should do, but like what might naturally happen. And then some people might, in a negative way, try to reassert control and become aggressive. So these are like two sort of like just being aware of like those are natural responses. They both are not good, not bad. Actually, maybe some are a little bit more bad. But then one thing that a solution that's not like natural, but you should do, is just seeking out time with friends and family who value you.
Yeah, that was my other one, was like reconnect.
But like, with people who value you.
Yeah,
like not like risking it with some new new intimidating friend or
be
something.
Around the
like
people who already have, what was the phrase we used? That they had a high relational value to you.
Also exercise. They said is like a natural opioid and can like help.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. It's just what I've been thinking about since literally doing this episode, because obviously when it comes to any sort of like mental strife, people are like, exercise is so great. I think that it's not a useful, well, it probably is a useful activity, but it's not necessarily useful advice when you're in the midst of one of these problems if you don't already do it. I find exercise to be very useful now that I have a habit of exercise.
But it could just be a walk.
That's true. Yeah.
I guess exercise has coded with like
are magic.
Yeah, like I guess it's like go for a walk.
Yeah, just move your body.
But you're right. Exercise could to a lot of people mean like doing like a CrossFit class, which is like that's insane.
It doesn't like fix. It's not like this crazy fix, but obviously it's gonna like help give you endorphins and like release a lot of emotional energy out. But you say that to somebody who's suffering extreme anxiety or depression. I know what it feels like to be like, okay, but like exercise isn't going to fix the problem.
Yeah, so maybe go for a walk is a better word. Like,
yeah, and I think in my mind it's like
attainable.
How do you build these as preventative like strategies in general? Like walk more often, so that even when you're rejected, even when you're whatever, you're just in the habit of doing that, whether that's like more intense exercise or not. And I think it's the same with reconnecting and being around friends, like just to wait till the moments you need it most. If it's not like habitually in you, like I know for me, I definitely like cut off and close in and want to be alone, which is literally the like exact opposite of what all the advice says. I did see a study that showed when people are mildly rejected, they are more likely to like follow these productive behaviors, like be around their friends and exercise. But when you're severely rejected, you're less likely. Like you're more likely to isolate and not be productive with these habits. So I don't know how to get over that hurdle. Like
another like solution which could help maybe that hurdle is like learning to ignore the negative reactions of people whose opinions of you are unimportant. So like
yeah.
Like
That's
if
hard.
the rejection is like, maybe you need to start thinking like, okay, were they that important to me or not? And then seeking connection with people with whom you know you have a higher relational value, as we said. And then, if necessary, making changes in yourself or ourselves that would increase the degree to which people value having connections with you. So, like, that's a little bit more intense because it almost is shame vibes, being like, what about me has led to this rejection? But, like, you could maybe have to reevaluate if you've done something.
It's not like you should always think everyone else is the problem. Like, there might be scenarios where your rejection is for good cause and it's worth, like, just at least having a moment to pause. But I think in general, most of our rejection pain is just like human brain stuff. And it's worth, unless it's because like you actually didn't have the sufficient skill to get this job. You're lacking like this credential and that credential. That's different to say, okay, objectively, I wasn't the best candidate. Maybe I need to like improve that. But in my experience, like outside of jobs, I think you're better off just like trying to find a more neutral way to desensitize yourself to.
What's like the worst rejection you've ever felt?
Ever?
I'm like, it's hard for me.
No, that's when I think it is like teenage love.
Teenage love
Is when I've probably felt the most emotional.
But like, did you ever put yourself out there and like, because you were closeted, I wasn't like asking someone out. You know what I mean? And getting rejected. Like, that would be so hard. Some people are so good at that. Like, I think as a gay person, you actually lose that. Like, I would have loved to have learned how to deal with that rejection in high school by asking out girls and then being rejected and finding one. Like, we didn't ever have that because it was like, don't ask out who you want to ask out because then you get punched in eye.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to reflect maybe even on that. The amount of rejection I felt through my life, I know I felt lots of it, and now I can't even think of what they were.
You're
like,
right.
There's something
it fades away.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what is the word. French guys on Grindr. Mitch said that in France, people like would just be like,
I was there with my friend.
I'm not interested in you.
Yeah, we both had the same experience where it would just be people being like, hey, nice to meet you. I actually have zero interest in you. And we'd be like, actually, it might have been better if you just didn't respond.
Oh my God. It's literally like, that is brutal. My biggest rejections was like the week I went to France and like interacted with anyone.
But part of me was like, okay, fair.
Yeah.
But also it's just like, just go away and block me or something.
Yeah. Like I'm trying to think like what I do think I am quite rejection sensitive to the point that I don't experience it that much because I like have a high sociometer and make sure it doesn't happen. Like if I can sense it coming, I like shut it down maybe even like before.
Maybe.
The most recent one for me is just like trying to be in an art show and then not getting in and then being like,
I think that affected
literally
you.
Like an amateur art show. I didn't even get in. And just being like, I wasn't trying to get into like a real art show. It was like of all the ones.
Yeah.
And I was pretty confident for that reason. And it was just like, yeah.
But I think it's important to even say it out loud. Like there's so many people who you look at everyone else and people who listen to our podcast or watch our YouTube channel might be like, oh my God, but you have so much successes in all these different ways and you post your art and you get all these like people saying nice things about it for you to be able to sit there and be like, and yet I have faced like rejection in this space that made me feel small.
Oh my God. When I did like stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
That like sometimes I'm like, yeah, I'm way happier now. I'm like, yeah, because it was just like constant rejection in a way that is actually crazy.
Twisted.
It's
yeah.
why stand-up comics are unhinged.
Yeah.
Because they're, I think, having to deal with rejection at all times. And also a thing that I always noticed was like very interesting about stand-up comics, especially like straight guys, was they would always like post them like bombing or whatever.
As though it was like, I was
like,
to
okay,
deal with
when
this.
I would like do a stand-up show and it wouldn't work, I would want to blow my brains out and be like, everyone in that room, I wish I could Men in Black or erase that. I do not want anyone to know about this. But then there's this weird, like, I bet it's them having to try to learn how to deal with rejection. They go, look at this and like put it on Instagram. And then you watch it and I'm like, how and why are you doing this? And it does feel masochistic and it does feel performative in this way. That's like, oh, I don't even care about rejection. Like, I feel like it's all about them being rejected and the perception. And like, it is crazy.
Yeah, no, it's
But then there is
wild
value.
space.
I am like, if I could have been like that, I would have been way more resilient.
Yeah.
Like,
It's just like some people are probably doing that and actually dealing with that rejection, and some people are putting it up as a shield to be like, it doesn't affect me. Look how strong I am. And like, it's just what type of person you end up being. You can do that work without having to post it
sometimes
online.
like I would just like talk to a comedian. They would just like lead with like how bad they bombed recently. And like, I'm like, oh, and they'd be like, have you ever bombed? I'd be like, no, never. Like, I was just like, wait, that's not what I want to talk about. Like, I don't. Like, it's really interesting. You're leading with your rejections. It's like, it is, I don't know. There's something big there when you're doing, when you're performing in that type of way.
Yeah. Well,
is Ernie farting? I'm smelling that. Someone who's never been rejected, our golden retriever. Okay.
Shall we take a little break and wrap up rejection section?
Yeah.
So if you feel rejected, just don't. Just kidding. You'll be great. Everything passes except for my rejection. It's forever and awful.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'll never be able to deal with it. Okay, we'll be back in a moment.